Life info, present. Man who buys tank on eBay is surprised by what he finds on the inside. We will like you to subscribe to our channel to join our community. Also, we will be more grateful if you turn on the notification icon so as to get instant updates. Please like and comment on this video.
Please dear, do subscribe and like this video.
Man who buys tank on eBay is surprised by what he finds on the inside. Every kid dreamed of owning a tank at some point when they were young, but chances are 99.99% of people never see their tank dreams come true. But for Todd Chamberlin, his dream became a reality. Buying a broken Russian tank off of eBay, of all places, Todd works on it at his employer's farm in England. Everything was going great with the restoration until he stumbled upon something special deep inside the machine. You might be wondering why a man that lives on a farm in England would want to purchase a full-size tank, and you wouldn't be alone. After all, a tank takes up a lot of space, is expensive to operate, and the laws for operating a tank are less than vague in most places. Thankfully in England, it is actually quite easy to buy and operate a tank, and with places like SALEHS, you can rent one for use or even go on a tank tour through England. SALEHS is run by collector Mead, and he offers tank driving lessons, rentals for film shoots, and even for private events. There is definitely visceral about driving a tank. With the ability to run over and crush anything in its path, Mead's farm is the perfect place to run over some cards. But oftentimes when buy a tank, they can include some unexpected surprises. Mead has collected and restored over 150 tanks over the years on his farm in Helmden, England, with his arsenal containing tanks from British, US, Russian, and Chinese armies. His collection is highly regarded, not only because of the sheer number of tanks he has, but the fact that he has the only Challenger 1 tank currently owned by a collector. Nick found a Russian T-54 tank, built by the Chinese, in an auction and immediately jumped at the opportunity. Taking after the famous Bond movie, Nick wanted to do a From Russia with Love experience where people would come and drive 3 Russian tanks. Unbeknownst to him, the tank he was by held a couple treasures, and a couple secrets. Joe Hughes was the 23-year-old owner of the Russian tank, and he totally didn't know what he had in his possession. Thinking it was just a pile of junk, Joe traded Nick the tank for an Abbott self-propelled gun and an army lorry, both worth a combined $39,000 USD. If only Hughes had known what was ferreted away inside the gas tank of the tank, his price surely would have changed. A tank is such an iconic piece of machinery, and with all of the data inside and outside available to those inspecting it, one can whip up quite a history. The Russian tank have a relatively low 1,500 miles on it, and it was deployed in Iraq during the Saddam Hussein regime. That right there should get your mind jogging about the possibilities. You may remember the photos that flooded the media around 2003 when Iraq was invaded and Saddam Hussein was removed from power. Saddam famously had gold-plated guns, rolls of money, toilet paper, and bunkers, palaces, and hideaways full of gold and riches. He'd formally seized power in 1979, and from 1979 to 2003 he was notorious for his lavish living and use of gold on everything he could. So with that much gold floating around at the time, you were bound to find it in unlikely places after the fall. It's also important to understand where the tank has been active. Tanks played an important role in the Iraqi conflict, and historians have said that poor use of tanks in battlefront activities was a contributing factor in the heavy losses on the Iraqi side. In one battle alone, the coalition forces destroyed 14 Iraqi tanks, and with such short-range battles at play, it's not really that surprising that the Russian T-54 tank had only 1,500 miles on the odometer when Nick Mead purchased it from Joe Hughes. When Nick Mead bought the Russian T-54 tank, you'd expect that the tank might require some maintenance. It's unclear what other maintenance was done up to the point when Mead added it to his fleet of military vehicles, but when mechanic Todd Chamberlin first started working on the tank, he uncovered a stash of live ammunition, which they promptly reported to the authorities. The Russian T-54 tank was obviously used as a repository to hide things, but it wasn't until he dug a little deeper that he truly found his treasure. Continuing his pursuit through the T-54 tank, Todd Chamberlin worked tirelessly to clean up the tank and prepare it for deployment into the tank's SALEHS fleet. While working on of the external fuel tanks, he felt something cold and heavy inside. He reached into the tank and pulled out a bar of gold bullion. Surprised by his findings, he immediately grabbed in again and found that the bar was not alone. Todd was in utter disbelief. Not expecting to be a treasure hunter that day, he was ecstatic at the amount of fortune that had just fallen upon him. But while he just found 2 bars, his luck didn't stop there. Bar after bar kept coming out of the fuel tank, and at a certain point they decided to film the whole ordeal, if not for bragging rights, for evidence that they weren't part of some crazy heist you only see in the movies. After all the gold was pulled out, they estimated it was around $2 million. But what now? What do you do with a large amount of gold? Who still owns gold? Where can you sell it? Did they inadvertently steal from someone? They had more questions than answers at this point, so Nick did the only thing he could think of. He reported the find to the emergency services. Why report it? It was an exhilarating experience to report all of that gold, but after the viral news coverage and the high of the initial discover passed, it was very apparent that they had a ticking time bomb on their hands. What if the original owner came for them? People thought that it was part of Saddam Hussein's treasures, but there is no definite evidence pointing towards that. So the reason they reported it is mainly because the cons outweigh the pros. But what happened next, they didn't expect. In all, Todd found 5 billion Argentine pesos of gold, with an estimated worth of around $2.5 million. When his colleagues were asked what they would do with the money, they all gave the same answers: buy a new house, a Range Rover, a fleet of tanks, etc. You know, as you do. But how did the tank end up on eBay? This is a question I like everyone to give us an answer on. What you think.
What will you do, if it were you who saw the treasures? Let us know in the comment below. Hope to hear from you soon.